Christine Lagarde, head of the ECB, the European Central Bank, and former head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, declared on May 22, 2022, that Bitcoin is worthless. I understand this statement to mean that she is taking away any usefulness from Bitcoin, because if it were useful, it would be worth something. This assertion is immediately followed by an injunction to all the authorities who listen to her to regulate Bitcoin to protect the poor, unconscious people who use it with the sole aim of making easy money. I'm concerned about these people who think it's going to be a reward, who have no understanding of the risks, who will lose it all, and who will be terribly disappointed, which is why I believe that should be regulated, Lagarde said. This statement made an impression on me because 2 days later I flew to Bangui, CAR, the Central African Republic, with a delegation of Bitcoiners initiated by Sebastian Kispiu, at the official invitation of the President of the Economic and Social Council, Mr. Alfred Tenga Poloko. But then what's going on? If Bitcoin is worth nothing and serves no purpose, why has the Central African Republic made it its reference currency, and thus above the CFA franc, since there is only one reference currency? That's what this video is all about. What is the use of Bitcoin in the second poorest country in the world? Come on, let's go. For us, it all starts with the Central African Republic's decision to adopt Bitcoin as its reference currency, and this statement by Head of State F.A. Touadera on April 26, 2022. Once there, we had the chance to meet members of the Economic and Social Council, ministers, and other personalities of the political, economic, and social life of the Central African Republic. In all transparency, we paid for this trip in full at our own expense, and with the members of the delegation, it was decided that we should not offer any gifts so that no one could be suspected of anything in either sense. We paid for our rooms, meals, and everything else. By the way, we stayed in the beautiful 5-star hotel called Ledger Plaza, which we really enjoyed. With a name like that, we could hardly go anywhere else. All kidding aside, the security situation in Bangui is complicated, and we were safest at the Ledger. So how can Bitcoin serve the interests of this country? The Central African Republic obviously has no power over the exchange rate with Bitcoin. So some argue that the problem would be the same. Yes and no. This is where we can very well think of an economy with two currencies. A local currency for everyday purchases that would have an exchange rate against other currencies, and a standard currency, Bitcoin, that could serve as a long-term savings. According to Gresham's principle, one could have a currency on the streets that suffers inflation and that people want to get rid of quickly, but would allow access to local production, and on the other, the Bitcoin that would be preciously put aside. It is a bit like the cohabitation of gold with the current currencies, but more modern and more efficient. Finally, if the Central African Republic were to regain full freedom to manage its trade surpluses, perhaps it would make good or bad use of them. I don't know, but at least this country would be responsible for its destiny. This seems to me to be a minimal right to which any sovereign country is entitled. However, beyond discussions with ministers, advisors, and major players in political, economic, and social life, I know that Bangui is a capital where there is poverty, and I wanted to know how Bitcoin could help people not in 5 years or 10 years, but today. So we went with David Oren, a member of the delegation who knows Cameroon very well, to discover the city. Some details about this trip. The people in charge of protocol had forbidden us to go out alone in Bangui because it is really dangerous. However, we decided to do it with David for 2 reasons. The first is that Bitcoin should serve the country, but more importantly, the people. And to know how Bitcoin can help, we need to understand how people live. A copy and paste of what has been done elsewhere would be doomed to failure, and we have not been disappointed. We will come to that. The second is that we know that we were followed by people who could protect us in case of need. I won't say more about it, but we had very good local contacts. So, we took a cab and left with Gaston, who works and lives in Bangui. Of course, Gaston is an alias. The cab dropped us off at the beginning of a street. We walked a bit, and he picked us up 200 meters further each time. So we were aware that we were breaking the rule, but we were also aware that we were doing what we came for, taking an interest in people. So what have we learned? One of the problems for the Central African Republic of the CFA franc is the quantity of bills. Economists call this the divisibility of money. This needs to be explained because it is a problem that does not exist in our country. See that piece of paper to the right of the ticket? That's a credit note I was given when I paid to order food. The person at the restaurant just doesn't have enough small bills to make change. Since the money supply is essentially made up of banknotes, France limits the amount of banknotes it sends into the country to control the exchange rate because the CFA is a mirror image of the euro. So to prevent the exchange rate from fluctuation against the euro, the Bank of France rationed banknotes, which created enormous friction in everyday trade. Because of the lack of banknotes, people often don't buy. That's why merchants create assets on small pieces of paper that are nothing more than another form of money. People adapt as they can and find solutions. Typically, Bitcoin would solve this problem instantly since one Bitcoin is divisible almost as much as you want. Today, one Satoshi, the smallest decimal of Bitcoin, is worth 0.0003 cents. But at this point, you're going to say to me, yes, but to use Bitcoin, you need a smartphone, and they don't have one. This is a question that we also asked ourselves. Well, as far as Bangui is concerned, a lot of people have a smartphone. Not the latest $2,000 iPhone, of course, but rather Chinese smartphones in the $50 range. Realize that the average salary in Bangui is about $100 a month. The minimum wage, if I may say so, is more like $50, to give you an idea. So even though incomes are low, and about 50% of the population of Bangui is unemployed according to what I was told in the streets, it is understandable that buying a smartphone is a big financial effort, but still possible. It is also important to note that these smartphones are very important for the inhabitants of the capital because it is with them that they save money through what is called mobile money. Mobile money is a strangeness that we are totally unaware of in the West because it was born from the monetary problems caused by the CFA franc in particular. To put it simply, people quickly realized that the telephone credits that can be bought to communicate have interesting monetary properties. They can be bought, stored in dematerialized form because they are attached to a phone number and a code, and finally, their value is a little less uncertain than the CFA franc. Finally, one can withdraw CFA francs for phone credits by contacting the access provider. So, in the Central African Republic, they started using phone credits as a way to save money. Mobile money was born. The problem is that private telephone operators, such as Orange, are in the position of bankers, and these operators are not necessarily more benevolent than bankers. The problems are therefore numerous. Tax fraud for operators in the countries, deletion of the accounts more or less arbitrarily, and so on. However, it is an interesting starting point because mobile money is used a bit like a very sad Bitcoin wallet. We saw stands to buy this mobile money every 50 meters in town. If the delegation's friend, and I'm thinking in particular of Nicolas Berthet de Galoy or Samson Moe, were unable to develop a Bitcoin wallet that could work on the telephone network, then the adoption of Bitcoin could be dazzling because people are already used to handling money with their smartphones. Gaston, like many others, uses mobile money to save enough to pay for his children's school. So let's keep in mind that people have more smartphones than homes are connected to internet or even to the electricity grid. According to the numbers the government gave us, Orange would have 1 million customers in Central Africa, which represents around 25 to 30% of the population who would have a subscription. If you're wondering how to save with Bitcoin, which is a volatile currency, you should know two things. 1. Bitcoin's volatility exists and it is high, but it goes up over a few years. This is quite different from traditional currencies which have no volatility, but whose value is always strictly downward. Bitcoin is therefore a friend of long-term savings. Number 2. Finally, for those who need stability, such as merchants who buy from a supplier in anticipation of reselling to a customer, or individuals who have a month's worth of money to do their shopping, the folks at Galoy are working on a stablecoin on Bitcoin. And yes, during this trip, it was discussed with Nicolas Berthet and Noor Elbawab, representatives of Galoy, to develop a Bitcoin wallet for the Central African Republic that would allow it to have a stable Bitcoin corner on the CFA and maybe the dollar. Volatility is therefore a problem that can be solved in different ways depending on the problem we want to address. Here's the idea. Programs called oracles monitor the price of Bitcoin against a number of fiat currencies, or whatever you want for that matter. With this information, the Galoy company can build a wallet connected to the Bitcoin network that offers you tokens, sort of stable sats, whose value is set to the dollar, the CFA franc, or the Galoy.io potato price, whatever. If you want to dig deeper and understand in detail how it works, I invite you to watch this video with Nicolas. He explains perfectly the workings of the machine. But in the case of the Central African Republic, it would be quite possible to have a stable coin circulating on the Bitcoin network indexed to the value of the CFA franc. But where it would be particularly interesting is that this stablecoin would be indirectly based on the euro and not the CFA franc. Why do this manipulation? First, because it is simpler. Bitcoin is more easily quoted in euros than in CFA, and there's a need for this quotation with Bitcoin to make it work. Second, if the CFA is devalued or falls, this stablecoin will retain its value because it is based on the euro. So it's a real additional protection to the CFA without the hassle of managing the CFA. The big difference with Bitcoin is that no one would be able to delete their account or steal their savings from the population. Finally, we still need to talk about the problem of cash, because even though many people use mobile money between the customer's hand and the merchant's hand, the exchange is done with bills. In these pictures, we are in the market of Simanja, and the sale is done on a blanket on the ground. As you can imagine, there are no payment terminals. Holding cash is therefore a huge risk for traders who have the day's cash in their pocket. Again, Bitcoin solves this problem with the Lightning Network. As we demonstrated and initiated to merchant representatives in Bangui, a Bitcoin transaction on a Lightning Network wallet literally takes 2 seconds. Bitcoin is therefore a real, immediate solution to serious monetary problems for the people of the Central African Republic. And I'm not telling you everything. As there is a large diaspora in this country, Bitcoin allows you to send money from abroad at no cost to the people there, whereas companies like Western Union charge about 15% to 20%. What struck me there, and I think this is the meaning of the exchange we had with the head of state, which lasted about 45 minutes, is that Bitcoiners are free to initiate projects and propose concrete actions because the president chose Bitcoin as the reference currency to embody a momentum of freedom in the country. And he knows what he's talking about because President Touadéra is a professor of quantum mathematics and cryptography. Imagine that he is still teaching at the University of Bangui during his free time. My personal feeling is to have met someone who aspires to the freedom to undertake, to think and to act for his country. Moreover, the day before our departure, President Touadéra announced the abolition of the death penalty in the Central African Republic. So yes, we are aware that the political situation is complicated, and the attacks are starting to pour in. The less intelligent among them take the risk of defamation and accuse us of being useful idiots complicit in Putin's war crimes because we help finance the Russian regime. That's all there is to it. It's funny because he explains that these 4 startups went to the Central African Republic when they should have stayed in France. I will simply point out to him that France ardently rejects innovation around Bitcoin, and that it is for this reason that 3 of the companies represented by Sébastien Nicolas, Jean-Christophe, and myself have already left to settle abroad or are in the process of doing so. And for others more concerned about not getting wet, they are content to relay their attacks by quoting anonymous sources so as not to assume any legal responsibility. This vitriol article in the newspaper Le Monde quietly accuses us of wanting to set up a circuit for the distribution of bribes and money laundering on behalf of the Central African Republic for the benefit of Russia. Well, we will note that I tried to contact these people directly to challenge their accusations, but the courage of the standard Parisian journalist has its limits, and to date, I have had no response. For my part, I keep in mind that the day after our night out, we were warned that there had been 20 deaths on the outskirts of Bangui. So what do? Do we talk and do nothing to be safe from suspicion? Or do we try to do something, each at our own level, to make a small contribution? As for the accusations of corruption, Bitcoin is not easily corruptible. All the serious institutions like the US Treasury or the crime and money laundering reports show that trading on Bitcoin is a very bad idea because everything is much more easily traceable on Bitcoin since it is an open network. The Chain Analysis Crime Report shows a rate of criminal activity on all cryptos of 0.15%, compared to about 5% for the cash dollar, which is, well, almost untraceable. But serious people who have done all their homework know all of this and don't fall for these spurious accusations that only highlight gross ignorance. Of course, the chase between the police and the thief will not end with Bitcoin, but if the gangsters want to launder money with Bitcoin, they will have to become very professional, and the slightest mistake will be fatal to the whole network, because on the blockchain, when you hold the thread, you are able to unravel the whole ball. Finally, we are accused of being more or less useless ignoramuses because only 15% of the population in the Central African Republic has access to electricity. As if we didn't know that? Sébastien Guspiou and I even have companies that operate in Bitcoin mining. David Orrin installs solar stations in the bush to equip villages in Cameroon. On Grand Angle Crypto, we have done several interviews and videos that explain and demonstrate how mining is an industry that supports the development of electrical networks for the benefit of the environment and populations. But all this, our small-time Parisian critics don't know it because they didn't take the time to work on the subject and they are satisfied with factually false a priori. So, gentlemen of the media, if you want to know why we went there, what we have proposed, and what we can do, then invite us to explain our work. No politics, just facts. Here's my email. There will always be a member of the delegation to respond constructively to you on set or remotely for all types of media. We just ask you listen to us before you shoot us and make us look like Satan's minions in Putin's pay. Finally, to end on a positive note, we were deeply touched by Bangui. What I remember is that in Bangui we cry and we laugh because we are touched by this joyful population that continues to smile, to celebrate and to live, even though they have serious problems on their minds. Thank you to the head of state, President Touadéra, for having received us. Thank you to the Economic and Social Council through its president, Alfred Tenga Poloko. And thank you to Gaston, a worthy representative of his fellow citizens that we love to see with David during this unforgettable evening. Thanks to all of you. On that note, see you soon for new videos. Ciao.